Hello, and welcome to Crushing Classical Podcast, redefining a thriving classical music career. I'm your host, Tracy Friedlander, and I'm so happy you're joining us for this interview. Today on the show, we have Bernhard Scully of the Canadian Brass. Bernhard is in the Canadian Brass, and he is also currently on the faculty of University of Illinois as he's a horn player, horn teacher, and I love University of Illinois. I went there for 1 year, so they have a special place in my heart over there. And I recently got on the phone with Bernhard to talk to him about the Kendall Betts Horn Camp, which he's taking over this summer. And I got on the phone with him because I really wanted to find out all about the camp and all about what that camp is about and what it's like to run a camp and everything else, for information about the book I have coming about creating your own career as a musician. And once Bernhard and I got on the phone, we just had the best conversation about careers. And I said, you need to get on my podcast. So I'm so glad that you obliged. So welcome, Bernhard. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Tracy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So would you please describe yourself to me in one sentence?
Okay. I'm a family man, a husband, a dad, a musician, a teacher, a lover of people, and a person who passionately loves to learn new things, trying to maximize my experience here on Earth as a human being.
I love that last part, maximizing your experience as a human being. That's great.
It just was what occurred to me when I was writing it down. It is definitely very hard, by the way, to put my life into one sentence. So
yeah.
I hope people will excuse my excessive use of commas.
So when we were talking on the phone, I just got really inspired by your journey as a horn player, going the traditional path of music school, and then you started to tell me that you recognized really at a certain point that you wanted something else other than only playing in orchestra. Like you liked orchestra, but that you recognized in yourself that you wanted more solo, more chamber. So can you tell me more about the beginning of that when you were starting your career?
Well, sure. Well, I think I should go back a little bit. I grew up in a family of musicians. My parents were both pianists, and I had music going on in my house like all the time. My dad was a professor of piano at a small school, first in South Dakota, then in South Georgia. My mom is a professional pianist, and she's an accompanist, and she taught private lessons. So I had piano music and just music in general going on like 24/7 at my house when I was a kid. I used to think it was strange when I went to other people's houses and they didn't have huge record collections and, all this stuff going on. So I was very fortunate to have that. And I think, from a fairly early age, once I started the French horn, when I was, sixth grade or so, and probably in seventh and eighth grade, I really started to listen to more and more music. And I really just fell in love with music. And I fell in love with kind of all aspects of it. There was a time when I think I was in eighth grade when I really wanted to be a jazz flugelhorn player, because that's the instrument that I had to play in jazz band. They wouldn't let me play French horn. I had to play flugelhorn. So I play the trombone parts and saxophone parts. But I mean, I just didn't really. I just loved all aspects of music, and I think it's what inspired me to initially start practicing so hard in the French horn. Was I just wanted so desperately to play the music that I was inspired. I mean, whether it was Mozart horn concertos or the great orchestra music, or the band music I liked, or jazz, or anything. I just liked it all, and I just loved to practice. And so I think one of the challenging things is, and anybody who goes into classical music knows this, the level of training is very intense. And to get any opportunities in the music business, you have to be very, very good. You have to start to really focus on the things that are likely going to get you opportunities, namely orchestra music, which has jobs and freelancing gigs and all the things that go with that. So I think from a fairly early, I'll never forget, like when I went to high school, for instance, and my band director told me I could no longer be in jazz band because I had to be in the marching band, because in order to be in the band program, you had to do marching band. And it wasn't his fault. He was just being kind of a typical band director. I remember how hard that was for me. I had to give up this thing I had done for the past 2 years jazz band, and I had now just focus on marching band and symphonic band to be in the band program. It was a huge sacrifice, not to mention sports. I had to give up sports too.
Oh, wow.
It was a very competitive band program, like a lot of the Southern programs are.
Mm-hmm.
It's great that we did a lot of really great things, but it was just a big sacrifice. And when I went to college, it was like, with the level of focus I was doing, just by almost attrition, you start to kind of leave things by the wayside. I no longer practice quite in the same way. It was all towards a certain thing. And so then when I finally got my first opportunities to play professionally, it was further focus, further distance from some of those things, like composition, for instance, that I really liked. And I think after a couple of years, I just really felt like I wanted to do some of the things that initially really inspired me as a player. Things like, jazz of all things for the French horn. There's zero market for it, but it was one of those things that was very dear to my heart. Solo music. Just focusing more on the soloistic aspect of horn playing, which is not really very focused on here in America in our training. In Europe, I think they have a much greater focus on that. In fact, they tend to focus on it even before the orchestral studies. Oftentimes, they'll put a greater emphasis on it. Here, it's like almost like a novelty for us to do it on the side. And composition, improvisation, all these different, even just broadening, even world music, all these different. These were things I really had a passion for. I just thought, if I don't take the time now to spend doing the things I really want to do, like namely my solo playing, which expanded into different kind of areas of horn playing, and also my jazz and my composition. I likely may never have the opportunity to intensely focus on them anymore, because I know as I get older, the opportunities for those things wane. Even the age you can enter certain competitions and things. So I just decided to kind of cut the cord. There was a moment I'd been playing in the Minnesota Orchestra as a substitute player when they had a vacancy for a couple of years. Is when all of this was going in my mind, working with my teacher, Kendall Betts, the guy who founded the horn camp. And he was helping me. He was mentoring me. But a lot of what it was doing was just trying to appease my teachers in reality. They were telling me I should do this.
So was that in undergrad you studied with Kendall Betts? Was that in Minnesota, or where was that?
Kendall was my teacher actually in high school. He was a very influential teacher. And then I went to school at Northwestern. I studied formally in college at Northwestern University. And then when I graduated, that's when they had the vacancy, and I started to sub with the orchestra, and then I ended up staying there for a couple more years as they needed me before they filled the vacancy. So
and so you felt like you were really following your teacher's desires at that point, like doing the orchestral.
In fact, before I went to college, and he definitely helped me markedly to get into college and to apply to the schools I wanted to go to. And he told me before I left, he goes, Bernhard, you should keep in mind in 4 years, we're likely going to have an opening in the Minnesota Orchestra where it's going to be third horn, and I'd just love to see you have that position. So he already had a real influence on me in that regard. And that's all I could think about. When I was in college, you could ask people that knew me then, they'd probably say, well, they asked me the question, what do you want to do? I was like, I want to play third horn in the Minnesota Orchestra, because that was what was put out to me. I just thought it would be a great honor to play with my teacher and to play with that wonderful orchestra that inspired me when I was growing up. It is one of the great orchestras of the world, but I just happened to be the orchestra I grew up with. So to get the opportunity to essentially do that, I wasn't playing third horn. I was playing essentially like second horn and assistant horn and doing different kinds of, essentially it's kind of a utility position as they were trying to reconfigure their horn section. But, did some third horn playing too. As far as I was concerned, I got a chance to do what I had sought to do, when I first went to college. And it was really exciting to me. But then it also, I think, not to downplay the experience, but I think it was, after about a year and a half of doing it, it was very like like my teacher had said to me earlier. It's like, well, it becomes a job after a while. I was like, what? No, you can't be serious. And it wasn't like a job, but I think what I kind of started to feel like is in order to do it really well, I had to kind of put all my eggs in one basket to focus on that. And I didn't even think I was doing it that well. Honestly, I didn't think I played or sounded like my teacher very much. I think I had, and I started to also realize that I was working very, very hard to kind of fit into a situation where I kind of intuitively knew I didn't really fit into that well, and I was doing it for reasons that I think were useful to me when I was younger. But at that point, I definitely had my own ideas about what I wanted to do, and had already had some success, especially in college, finding my own voice on the instrument. I just really had a desire to express myself like I wanted to, artistically. And I think there was a moment of transition you mentioned in your questions, like when we come to this point in our lives and we kind of make big decisions. You kind of don't either take the safe route. There was a moment when the Seattle Symphony had an opening kind of similar. They had they called it a 2-year opening, and they were essentially going to allow me to come join the symphony as fourth horn. I had been recommended by another person. You probably know. I'll leave guess names out of it at this point, but and I was excited. I was thinking, oh, this is another great opportunity, great job. I knew it would pay pretty well and different city. But the thing was, at that point, I had the opportunity. I had gotten a fellowship to study with Douglas Hill, who taught at University of Wisconsin-Madison. And my goal was to go and refocus myself and to focus on my solo playing, to do jazz. He was going to help me with my jazz and my composition and other interests I had. And I was going to hopefully go to Europe to study with some teachers I wanted to study with. I wanted to study with Herman Bauman, and I wanted to study with Freudis Verkera to get more ideas and to get more inspiration.
Right.
And so it was very difficult. I mean, it was a fellowship. It wasn't like a ton of money. It was basically enough to have me live there and go to school. I was just going to get married. I was going to get married in about a year. I was engaged. And there was this moment at which I just, and Gail Williams, my teacher from undergrad, had said to me, "You got to go study with Doug." I think I really trusted her. I really felt like she knew me very well. We had a really good relationship, and we still do. I mean, she's one of my close friends. I very always will be inspired by her, and thankful for the work that I had the opportunity to do with her in college. And she just told me, she really felt I needed to go work with him to kind of take me to the next level of whatever was going to happen for me, which I had no idea what it was. I just was, thinking, well, I think something else is going to happen here. I don't know what it is. So it was a little bit like walking off of a cliff, because I had sort of security on one end and more traditional opportunities on one end. And yet I had this new thing, which was just totally up in the air. And actually Kendall, of all things, the person I had been kind of working with and who I was trying to please, I think he realized over time, what I was after. And when I mentioned this dilemma I had, he mentioned to me, he said, what would you rather do? Would you rather go do the same thing you've been doing for the past 3 years in Seattle, or would you rather go take your new path, go to do study with Doug Hill, go to Germany, study with Herman Bauman, focus on your solo career? He knew what I was doing. He knew exactly. Right. And so I was very fortunate to have these teachers that, however much they wanted me to follow in their footsteps, just because that's the nature of what's going on, they had enough care and wherewithal to really encourage me to go. So I was fortunate to have people to encourage. In fact, Kendall, if you knew Kendall, you could hear him saying this. He told me that if I went to Seattle, he would disown me as a student, as a friend, in a very loving way.
That's amazing. That's really amazing.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm sort of being facetious, but he actually did say that. And I love the guy, and if you knew him, you would realize it wasn't actually a bad thing. It was a good thing.
Yeah, so, he was telling you in a strong way that he really supported you doing what you wanted to do and following your heart, which is a really great aspect to have in a teacher. So when you were offered the job in Seattle, was that a 1-year position?
Yeah, offered as a 2-year position, actually, with a possibility of future employment. I think they have a different kind of a union or something. So
right, okay, so they're not part of it. So that was just an invite only. There was no audition,
or
they
needed somebody fast.
Right. So that would be a hard decision, especially when you're getting married. You're looking at, being broke for a little more time or having a stable situation where you're getting paid. So you took a risk. So tell me about going to Wisconsin. What was that like?
Oh, it was just the best 2 years ever. I mean, I loved every single minute of it. It was a little weird, going there after playing professionally because, the school orchestra was definitely like a school orchestra, but it was,
Yeah.
but yet again, it was great because it was a couple things. I mean, Doug is just, do you know Doug Hill? Do you know?
I don't know him. No.
Oh boy. I mean, Gail used to always tell me that he was the best horn teacher. And I was thinking like, but aren't you the best horn? And she'd go, no. And I remember like even at Northwestern, all the best students that would come for grad students were always from Wisconsin. And they were just, rocking. And they all have positions somewhere now. And then so
Wow.
I always would think, maybe there's something to this guy. And Doug is just, he's one of the, I mean, he's really hard to describe. He's the nicest, most caring, thoughtful person you'd ever meet. And he's brilliant. Like he has a very high IQ. I mean, the guy is super intelligent. He has an incredible ability to communicate as a teacher. So what struck me is that he wouldn't necessarily play in lessons. It wasn't like he'd demonstrate, but he could take somebody like as a freshman who had very little experience, maybe hadn't ever had lessons. And in 1 year, like they were playing really good. Like he could do it to anybody. You teach a fish to play the French horn, and have a positive attitude. He's super positive. He's very encouraging. He just was, I would just call an extraordinarily enlightened person, and extremely inspiring to be around in all regards. And plus he was a Renaissance man. He, certainly had played in an orchestra. He played in Madison Symphony at that time. He was, a wonderful composer, arranger, a jazz artist, recording artist. His teaching was spanned. He could teach people in all different capacities. He could teach ed students, and they become like the best educators. He teach performance students; they become the best performers.
Wow.
He teach grad students, and they all get teaching jobs, and doctoral students, and just all the while contributing to it. I mean, he just was. He could write extremely well. He could do everything, and kind of embodied what I think of as the ultimate professorial type. And true Renaissance man. And plus, he could talk to you about he could talk to you about anything. Like you could sit there and talk about politics, philosophy, religion, whatever it was, and he'd be like cutting edge things coming out of his mouth. And so it's just
amazing.
And not only that, but he was also, I thought, very enlightened because I think if I were to have studied with certain people, I would have told them like, I want to play solo music and I want to go play jazz. They probably would think, like, okay, well, you probably should go somewhere else, like I'm not going to deal with that. And but Doug was like he was totally open to kind of embracing what each student wanted to do, and so all I had to do is tell him. I gave him the plan of attack, like this is what I want to do. Blah, blah, blah. I had all these ideas, and that was what the lessons were. We just totally dove into it. So after the course of 2 years, it was like he had been with me every step of the way. And plus, I learned tons of things about the horn. I mean, not just he's helping me, but I mean, he was helping me from the ways he knew how too as a teacher. And I still needed to address certain areas of my playing. Having played low horn for a while, I needed to get my high chops really back in order. So he helped me.
And he knows. I mean, that's the one thing I know about him because I have his high horn book, and it's really spot on about that. So
he really just knew everything. I mean, he was like the ultimate resource, and so supportive of all his students. I mean, he was just like having a horn dad, who just loved you, and just wanted to help you in all regards. So it was really, really, really special time. And I got the chance to I got a position in Madison Symphony and the Wisconsin Chamber Orchestra there too. So I got a chance to still play in the orchestras that he was still playing in Madison Symphony. So I got a chance to play with him. I feel like it's been a special experience for me to play with some of my teachers in their various orchestras.
Oh yeah, really?
So that was cool. And then, and to this day, I mean, he's one of my very closest friends, and I have him down here to teach the students a lot. He's coming actually in 2 weeks. So he just, so over the course of those 2 years, I feel like it was the time when I really I kind of came into my own as me, who I am now. That was the time I, took the risk to truly embrace who I am as a musician, go just full throttle with my own ideas, not be worried about what other expectations were of me. And he was fully in support of it the entire way, with all the risk that was involved with that. So I'll always be very, very grateful. And not to mention just the other really wonderful people there at the school and the symphonies who are my close friends to this day. And I really have a special place in my heart, not to mention there's really good beer there too. So.
Well, that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Especially musicians need that.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it sounds like he's really a holistic teacher. You're including everything. It ties into the sentence that you just said to describe yourself about, that you want to fulfill everything that you can on this planet. I can't remember the exact words that you
maximize
said.
My experience.
Maximize your experience. And this teacher helped you embody that while you were in school. He was supporting you he never told you you couldn't do this or you couldn't do that, or I only teach orchestral excerpts or anything. He was there to support you in all of the endeavors that you were interested in, that you were passionate about. And what an impact to have a teacher like that who supports you in all aspects and can, converse with you about all kinds of different things and just be that kind of support. It's really incredible.
I feel grateful every day I had. I mean, all my teachers really, but that was a really special time. And I think, Gail knew that he would be a good person for me too. Our personalities are, I think, somewhat similar. We got along very, very well. We get along very well to this day. He continues to inspire me. And I think often now that I'm at the university, he pretty much set the standard to me. I don't know if I'll ever be able to remotely come close to what he did in terms of his university job, but at least he's there. It's kind of like it's a beacon of light you're shooting for, down the road,
right,
from all different angles. So, yeah.
And I love how it takes a village. Like Gail was able to say, you need to study with this person. She wasn't saying like, I'm the only person you ever need in your whole life. She was,
oh no,
she was saying your next step is this person. And now you're doing the same thing for your students. You're bringing him to you. And now you have the camp, which I'm sure you're going to continue to do things like that at the camp as well. And help people see that, you're not just finding the one, horn god to worship, and that person has everything they say is,
a horn god who rises out of the mountain. Oh, God of horn.
Yes, tell me what to do next. You're the only person I can get answers from.
Give sacrifices to you.
So I know that you mentioned after in our conversation on the phone, which I'm referring to on this interview, that you did some competitions while you were with Doug Hill,
mm-hmm.
and then you were able to get exposure in that way. And tell me what happened after that. Did you end up going to Germany, or what happened after those experiences?
During those 2 years, the first year I got some travel money with the fellowship, was one of the perks of doing that. And so I had already had experience with Herman Bauman. He had been the solo coach at the horn camp for a number of summers, and he was always my favorite horn player to listen to growing up. So it was especially amazing for me. And this is after his stroke. I mean, he had a stroke. He wasn't playing so much at this time. He was effectively retired, but I had the opportunity to spend quite a bit of time with him. And he mentioned to me, like, based upon hearing me play, and he was encouraging. He said, you should come study with me in Germany for a while. I'll help you with the competitions. And it really got me thinking, like, I should really do that. Because sometimes people might say that to you, and it might never happen. And you just think, oh man, that could have happened. But I was like thinking, I'm going to make this happen. I can't not do this. This is just like a dream. So I spent the money and I got the plane ticket and I went over there. It was for a week initially. And I stayed at his house and I had like 8 hours of lessons a day with him. He would wake me up in the morning. He lived there with his son. His wife, unfortunately, had passed away a number of years before. And he was fully healthy at that point, that he had recovered from his stroke. And so I stayed at his house. He woke up early in the morning. We'd get a little breakfast. He'd fix some breakfast. We'd do like a 2-hour session, and then we'd take a walk outside, like a nice German jaunt, and then come back, do another like hour, and then we'd have like some like sausage and potatoes for lunch. Then we do another lesson, and then we go on some sort of outing to some historic thing. He'd show me his old school he taught at. Then we come back and eat some dinner, then have more lessons at night.
Wow.
It was just like every day. It was just crazy. And I think back and I think, wow, it was amazing. One day we went down to the Alexander factory and I picked out an Alexander 103 horn with him, and luckily he was there because I probably wouldn't have got a good one if he wasn't there. Because I definitely was not a known commodity in the horn world at that time. They probably would have wondered who I was. But since he was there,
take this one that we just dropped on the floor.
Exactly. Yeah, it could have happened. So it was just, a very inspiring, and it helped me, maintain a relationship with him to this day too. He unfortunately had another small stroke a couple of years ago, so he can no longer do international travel. But when I travel to Europe now, or when I'm in the midst, I sometimes am able to see him, and very, very special man and wonderful human being. And I learned so much, from a competition standpoint. He helped me focus on those competitions. And sure enough, the first one I entered after I got back from studying with him was this competition in Minnesota Orchestra had called the WAMSO competition, Women's Association of Minnesota Orchestra. I got one of the top prizes in the competition. And I hadn't done that prior. I entered that a couple of years earlier and just, didn't really get anywhere with it. And now I didn't win it, but I got to the upper echelon of it, which to me was definitely all I had really hoped to achieve. And it was significant for me because that's kind of against all instruments. And that gave me some more opportunities. And I did a couple of them. And it finally culminated in, I was going to do a couple of the big European ones. And I only ended up doing one. I did the one in Geneva. That was the first. And did pretty well. I got invited to it and got there and played as best as I could. Of course, didn't win it. But that wasn't important. It was just I spent 7 months preparing for that, memorizing everything. And I did all these all these recitals for it. And there's a lot of small competitions. A lot of them I did actually fairly well at the time. So I was really, kind of on this trajectory to keep focusing on the thing I'd set out to do. And then when I got back from this trip, it was a really fun trip to Geneva. My in-laws came, they supported me. My wife and I had just got married. And it was beautiful. And we went on another, a week-long trip to Zermatt, after the competition to celebrate with her parents. It was just really a fun time. And I got back, and I think we got back on a Monday. And on Tuesday of that week, I got a call from a name I had not heard in a long time, Gene Watts, who, when I picked up the phone, I realized it was the trombone player of the Canadian Brass. And he says, we're wondering if you want to come, got your name from so-and-so, we have a horn opening, I wonder if you want to come audition for us. And I said, at first I was thinking, okay, you mean for a special concert? Right. It wasn't processing what was going on. And so, he goes, no, we have a horn opening. Jeff is leaving the group. And so we need to find somebody, and we got your name. And so we were listening to a few people who'd like to listen to if you want to come. And I said, well, okay, when do I do? And he goes, well, we need you to come to Philadelphia this weekend. I said, okay, so in 4 days. Right. And I said, what should I play? They go, well, we'll have you play things in the quintet. We'll have you read with the quintet and play some of the solo music you have for your competitions. And I said, oh, okay. And so they got me this plane ticket. I flew to Philadelphia on Saturday morning. I got there, met all the people, all the Yamaha representatives. It was all their people, Yeah. And they were doing this concert with the Philadelphia Orchestra for 2 days. And so everything was at Verizon Hall. And so I went backstage and, read with the group, just quintet piece after quintet. It was all pieces I'd never seen. But it was fun. It just felt really good. It was I was just the whole time feeling very positive and very good. And I was thinking the whole time, man, if I hadn't spent all that time, preparing for my solo competitions, I would not be ready for this.
Right?
My chops wouldn't, my brain wouldn't be here. My chops wouldn't be there. I'd be using the wrong kind of instrument. I'd be using my old big Lawson horn I was using in the Minnesota Orchestra, nothing against them, but it wouldn't have been an appropriate instrument for the solo competitions. They had scaled down to a, nice, more manageable instrument, and even it was Yamaha of all things, which they were playing at the time. And so I just felt like I was ready, and did that for 2 days. Did the next day, did the same kind of thing, read more music and saw the concert and hung out with them. And they said, well, we're listening to a few more people. We'll let you know in a couple of days. We need somebody, especially for this Asian tour coming up. And I was like, okay. And I just was really happy I had the opportunity to audition for them. And then they called me a couple of days later and said, well, we'd like to offer you the job, and we'd like you to be able to come to Toronto in 3 weeks to start rehearsing. And I was just that was So all that work, and that for me is what most people know me as now. They know me as the horn player of the Canadian Brass,
Yeah.
very famous group. And, but really my ability to join the group was a culmination of many, many, many things. Lots of, like you said, a village of people. And I would not have had the opportunity to do that very unique kind of thing. I never saw it coming if I hadn't, taken the risk to focus on what I really wanted to focus on. So therefore my time in the group has been a joy, because I feel like for me, it was the outlet that I didn't know was, always desired, but had no idea what it would be. It was an ability to be a soloistic player, play chamber music, play, very versatile jazz of all things. We do tons of jazz charts. It's a lot of variety in the playing, a lot of creativity, close communication. It's very different than like a large orchestra setting and a chamber music setting. We make a lot of decisions ourselves. So that was a really, really wonderful experience for me. And I got, working with other really amazing people with similar interests, both playing wise and creatively. One of them actually, amazingly, was a former colleague, trumpet player from Minnesota Orchestra, who had joined the orchestra right when I started working with him. And he was kind of bemoaned by the fact that he had got the runner-up position with the Canadian Brass. And he was, I got to kick my orchestra. I was thinking, like, both sound pretty good. But, but I was kind of, never processed it. When I joined, they had the I guess the tradition of hiring the previous runner-up, who they would take great interest in, to possibly be the replacement. Mm-hmm. And so they asked me if I knew him. I said, yeah, of course. He's one of my good friends, Charles Lazarus. And so that made the experience all the more wonderful, because I had a friend, to join somebody I admired greatly and who I had never had the chance to work with in that capacity. And so that, it was just really, really, there's a lot of work leading up to it, a lot of risk, a lot of falling down and getting back up again, a lot of naysaying, I remember some of my teachers really raised their eyebrows when I made some of the decisions I did. But I think to me, it was all worth it, because I got the chance to do something that I really loved, and also was allowed me to have a career in music. So
really, and if you wouldn't have gone to Wisconsin, likely you would not have done all of those solo competitions and studied over in Europe, and then through that you might not have gotten the Canadian Brass audition. I mean, it really, that one risky move took you in a totally different direction, and now you can look back on it and say, wow, that choice brought you to all those places,
Yeah, and it was just something I felt really deeply in my heart. I just felt like, if I don't do these things, I won't be true to myself and all the things that inspired me when I was young. That's why I wanted to describe that, because I felt like what I was doing is just giving credence, at least even if it was just those 2 years in school. I just wanted to allow myself to just experience those things for me. I wanted to do it for myself, because so much of the profession, I think, to really get into it, you make a lot of sacrifice. We're even playing in an orchestra. It's a lot of sacrifice. You're in a situation where you don't have a whole lot of creative control of what you're doing. You play the music that's put in front of you. You're working for a conductor. You're working within a section. It's pretty limiting. I mean, it's wonderful in all regards, but I mean, it definitely is. To do it really well, you have to put a lot of things to the side.
It is, yeah. There are a lot of wonderful things about it, and there are a lot of limiting things about it. So I'm glad that you're bringing that up, because it's not wrong to say what's obviously there, which is you're playing for a conductor, you're playing in a section, you're playing the music they put in front of you. Other people decide what the repertoire is going to be for the year. You don't have artistic liberty. Sometimes you have security when the orchestra is solidly on financial ground that isn't hopefully going to change in the next little while. But at the same time, you're right, like, no music career is really totally solid. But the fact that go ahead.
I'm sorry, you can finish your thought. I'll
just the fact that that it's obvious that you don't have as much liberty and choice when you're in an orchestra job is a good point to make.
Yeah, you don't really think about that when you're young. You just think how wonderful it is to be immersed in the music. But there's all these other things that can go into it. And so I think for myself, I enjoyed so many other things and really wanted to give myself the chance to do them as best as I possibly could. Um, and I thought actually initially after those 2 years, I thought that I would probably go back on the audition track and try to secure just a position somewhere to have security. I had a master class with Dave Jolly when I was in Wisconsin. He came, such a great guy. Maybe you've met him. I wish I had more contact with him over the years because I just admire the guy so much. But I asked him the questions.
Yeah.
I was already thinking about it. I said, "Well, how do you become a horn soloist?" Very typical college question. He looked at me. He's like, "Well, the most important thing is you find a base of operations. It could be an orchestra. It could be a teaching position. It could be a computer job. And I kind of thought about it. I thought that's a really good answer. He was just saying find some way to pay your bills so you can do something creative. And sorry, I hope that noise wasn't too loud. That's my. Did you hear that?
What?
My email beeps very loudly when I'm.
Oh no, I didn't even hear it.
Oh, good. Okay. Anyway, so I thought it was just really good advice. I was thinking about you get a position, so then you can go out and do other things too. And I think the thing with the orchestra though, the orchestra is quite challenging. So to further my story, I'll just continue. So when my wife and I were 30, I'd been in the group for 3 years and had time of my life. But then that we decided we wanted to have first baby because that was 30 years old. We'd always talked about this. And so it's okay, here we go. And I thought it could probably work even though I was traveling a fair bit because we had really a lot of concerts back then. And it was a lot of time away. But when I came home, I didn't have any other obligations. So I was totally, free to be invested fully in the family. So I wasn't too concerned. But then by the end of the year, right after Ellie, our first, was born, the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, who I'd had some contact with, I did a little bit of work with them way back when, I was working in Minnesota. They had a first horn opening, and I guess they hadn't hired anybody for a long time. And they were asking for subs, and so they asked me if I could come and sub to play a concert, and so I did. And luckily I had the week off, and I was pretty tired because we just had Ellie, and I was just after the first baby, you're pretty much a zombie after the first month. And so I went and played, and then they were very nice, and they said, we really like your playing, and we have this first horn opening. Would you be interested in the job? And I kind of thought about it. I thought, well, I don't really want to leave the Canadian Brass. I love the group, and it's kind of a dream come true for me. But I started thinking I should probably consider this. It's a wonderful orchestra. The people seem amazing. It's also where my wife and I were from originally, with our grandparents, my mom, her parents, my brother, all these, my friends were all there. And I just thought, well, this could be maybe this is the universe directing me in the next step here, So I did. I did the trial weeks and all of that. And at the end of it, they said, well, we'd like to offer you this position. And I was really thrilled, but also very saddened that I was going to be leaving the quintet because it was really, I can't really describe it. It was such a special experience for me to play in that group. And the fact of trying to leave the group willfully was weird. I was like, yes, I'm doing the right. It was a very difficult decision, but I really felt that I was making the right decision. And I felt that maybe it was time for me just to settle down and be in one place and do something different, focus on orchestra. And it was a different kind of an orchestra. They played all this different kind of music that was not big orchestra music. It was, Mozart symphonies and Haydn symphonies and all of the Baroque and classical and early Romantic, lots of modern music I'd never played. So, it was a huge learning experience for me to play in that orchestra with some truly, some of the best musicians I've ever worked with in my life. And then after 3 years of that, we were about to have our second baby, Abby, and the orchestra was running into some difficulties. And I guess, it was a weird moment. I guess I don't, well, I'll just say is, I was having a lot of second thoughts about that decision to join the orchestra at the time. And I was doing a horn convention. I was very fortunate to get invited to play a solo at an IHS convention. And I shared my recital with a group called the Four Hornsmen of the Apocalypse. which you've probably heard of. They're really awesome.
Yeah, I have heard of them.
Audrey Good, she plays in Toronto Symphony, and Jerry Wood just in Dallas, and they're all like really successful horn players all over the United States. But they come back and they play in this horn quartet, and they're really funny. And so I was really impressed, and I realized that they all were the University of Illinois graduates. They studied with Kazimierz Smokolak, and I did not know that. I thought, wow, University of Illinois. Didn't know much about it. And it was just like a week after that I got asked to my interest level to teach at the University of Illinois. Like they said, their horn professor was leaving, and they needed somebody just to fill in for the year. And I thought, well, that's a really cool opportunity. Maybe I'll. And it struck me like, okay, I think it's the next step, And
right.
So I thought about it, and we decided just to plunge into it. And after about a semester of doing the job, I just loved it. I mean, I love teaching. I loved getting to work with the faculty in that sort of way, much more of a multidimensional way than just only playing. It afforded me great opportunities to do my outside work, solo type things, and a whole variety of things. There was research funding for different projects. I just thought this was a really cool thing. Plus, it's a great place to live, as you know. It's a nice college town. It kind of reminded me of where I was growing up. So I was very fortunate, and I made the transition, and I just realized it was a better fit for me, professionally than the orchestra. And I didn't miss the orchestra very much, actually, after that. I kind of was asking myself, like, how do I feel after after half a year, after a year, after 2 years? And all I did was feel like I liked my job more and more, and I liked my students more and more. And so I just really was feeling good about it. And
right. Was there ever a moment where you were like, uh-oh, I'm leaving like my playing, like, you're going to a teaching position, likely you're going to have opportunities to play. So maybe you weren't really worried about it. I don't know if you were, but was there a moment where you were looking at that opportunity and saying, this is making me nervous to turn away from a performing job and go to a job that my position is for teaching? Or
yeah, I think a little bit, because I didn't understand. It was such a new thing. I didn't have any experience with it. Like full-time teaching position is very different than doing, say, teaching adjunct at a college with a couple of students. Like you're responsible for all the students, and you're immersed in the university. It's a really, really different thing. And entirely, it's a full-time job. So a little bit, but yet again, I had the confidence that I talk a lot with Doug Hill, and Gail Williams had at that point, transitioned into Northwestern University as the full-time professor, and I saw her performing all over the place, and it became apparent to me that it was a good place to try. I was already doing all this outside stuff, and so it seemed likely that would probably continue. And it would be easier to do it in the university setting than it would in the orchestra. Because in the orchestra, as you know, like if you want to take a week off, I mean, I had to take a week off without pay. I would have to lose a salary, and I have to lose my contributions to my benefits and all that just to take a week off. Whereas at the university, they afford you research time, even though you have to make up your lessons, which can be very time intensive and stressful. But you do have that control. You have the control to leave the university and come back, as long as you fulfill your obligations to the university, and are organized at the studio. So I had that confidence. I thought, this is like Dave Jolly was saying, maybe if my destiny is to keep fulfilling my dreams of solo and, all the jazz interests and stuff I had, which, sounds silly to some, but I mean, that was really my passion. I thought, and I was already getting opportunities. So I thought, this makes perfect sense. Plus I love teaching. I had found that out. Actually, we'll talk about the horn camp a little bit, and I really, really love it. It became clear to me that teaching is something that I need to do. It's not something that I think I could give up. I think it's something that's very kind of next to my heart, and so I felt like a more full person when I came here to be able to work with these amazing students and to share with them and to learn from them and to have this really immersive experience with them teaching wise. My mom always told me when I was young, she goes, I think you'd be a good college teacher. And so it just felt natural. It just felt logical again, I kept asking myself, like, how do I feel? And I felt really good. Felt tired. It's a lot of work, but it's a good kind of tired. So yeah, it was, the fear was definitely a little bit of that. I wouldn't call it fear. It was just a little bit of, you're kind of jumping again into the unknown. You don't really know what's going to come your way. And, but I think the key is for anybody who comes into one of these positions, if you want to keep your performing active, you just have to make opportunities. You have to insist that you keep the things going that you have. And fortunately I had some things going. Yeah. So then a couple of years down the road, a weird thing happened. I was, Thanksgiving break had finished, and actually I had gone back to play principal horn for a couple concerts with the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra because they had they were in their lockout. They were going through some pretty tough times, and so the players had asked me to come back, and so I had that experience, and it was nice to see everybody again. But also I felt pretty fortunate that I was out of that experience too, because they were the orchestra had unfortunately experienced some very, very difficult times. And I was very saddening to see all my friends going through that. And I felt it was the right thing that had happened to me, I think. And it was right after that I got this email from Chuck Dellenbach, who was the tubist of the Canadian Brass. He said, well, we have a horn opening again. Do you have any recommendations for, somebody to come take the position? And an audition for us. And I kind of thought, well, that's really nice. Like, wow, Chuck has confidence in my teaching. My students are doing pretty well. But honestly, I really couldn't think of anybody to maybe, was quite up to would meet the criteria I knew that would the group. And I was kind of write down his message a bit more. And he said, well, you know who we're looking for? We're looking for Bernhard Scully. And I was like, wait a minute. What are you asking, Chuck? And there was already a precedent for someone rejoining. When I was in the group, Joe Bergsteller had rejoined after a hiatus of a couple of years, and Jeff Nelson had rejoined after a while when he was at Indiana. He's at Indiana University. Yeah. And so I thought to myself, like, well, maybe this is what's good. So I wrote my kind of funny email back, I send it to you someday where I thought about somebody I couldn't really think of. This person's a good player, but doesn't have the stage presence. This person has the personality, but does the playing. So I really couldn't think. But then I thought, I'm Bernhard Scully, and maybe you're looking for me. So, and he wrote back with a big smile, and that's indeed what he was asking. He was asking if I would be interested in rejoining. And so for the past 3 years, I have been, doing both things. I've been doing, the university, and I've been doing on the road with the Canadian Brass. And it's been, I don't know. If you would ask me 20 years ago, like what my life would have been like, as a musician, I would definitely not have described this to you in any sort of way whatsoever. And I don't even know why it's all happened or what's, how it's transpired. I think when you're in the business, you just sort of take opportunities that come your way. There aren't a whole lot of the opportunities that oftentimes happen that way. And I've been fortunate to have these opportunities, and I just took them. And like Chuck used to always say, one of the reasons the group was successful is because they just never said no to anything. So I kind of in the same way. I've just never really said no to anything except for,
Well, the way, and I'm just over here listening and witnessing the story that you're telling me and enjoying it so much and getting inspired so much about it. But really, yes, you've gotten a lot of great opportunities, but you approached your career in a very intentional way. You knew what you wanted and you followed your heart. And I think, I can only speak for myself, but I wasn't always following my heart, and I wasn't always intentional. Those two things are so important because you need to, first of all, to be intentional, you also have to kind of know what you're doing. And I felt a lot of times that I was on my own navigating this new career path with just flying by the seat of my pants, Mm-hmm. And it was before the internet. Not to say that that's an excuse or anything, but it's so much easier now to do research about who your teachers are, what they were up to, what kind of teacher are they. There's just a lot of things you can do now.
Yes,
true. And you as a child of musicians, I think that's really lucky. That is really lucky because you're coming from a place.
I would say that unequivocally. I would say I'm extremely fortunate, and I'm grateful for that every day, because I don't think I would. I think in a lot of levels, what most importantly, what it showed me is that being a professional musician is absolutely possible, because here are my parents. I think for a lot of people,
Right.
I think they were even told systematically that it's not possible. Like, oh, you
Yeah.
can't do that. And
Yeah.
there's no music around them. But here I was growing up, whatever my parents were telling me, all I knew was what I saw, that they were being
Yeah.
successful, and they were
Yeah.
musicians. So I had that benefit and that advantage. And I
It's a
never,
mental jumping off point from a different place a lot of people would have if they're not coming from a musical background. So yeah, in that way you were, I would say, lucky, because that's random that you got parents that were
very
musicians.
much.
But then after that, your choices were, from here, it looks like they were intentional. You said, I'm going to go this direction because I really, that time that band director said you weren't allowed to do jazz anymore, and you said, oh, I really like jazz. And then,
Yeah.
a number of years later, you said, I really want to try that, and I really want to do that. And with that intention, took you down that path. And what ended up happening, you really got to play jazz in the only really kind of career path I could even imagine for horn playing jazz, is in the brass quintet of the
To be
Canadian
fair, it's
Brass.
not really like combo jazz, but it's as close as we can. I'll take it.
It's as close as you can get, really,
Yeah.
and get paid for it, I would say. I don't know,
Exactly.
So, yeah. So that's what's inspiring, is that to watch someone who had an intentional career path, and that's how it transpired. So it's interesting. So tell me more about the horn camp that's coming up.
Yes. Well,
It's been established.
This camp has been around. This is going to be the 23rd year of its existence. As I said, I studied with Kendall in high school, and he was an amazing teacher, and I got to see him, every week playing the orchestra, and a mentor. And then my last year studying with him, when he was preparing me for college and auditions and stuff, he mentioned he really wanted to start this camp. And to me, I just didn't know what he was talking about. I thought, that sounds cool. And, I just, wow, that's great.
Wow, sounds cool.
And so then I graduated from high school, and I was kind of looking at the summer, and then he called me up. He goes, Bernhard, I got the camp going and everything. I'd love for you to come up and help me with the camp. It was going to be about a month. And I thought, oh, okay, sure. And so it was for 1 week, and it was held at this boarding school in Upper New Hampshire called the White Mountain School. Lovely little place. And the faculty was himself, David Ohanian, who was then in the Canadian Brass, and also a guy named Abby Mayer, who was a retired player who had played like in the military and a couple of symphonies, kind of beloved older gentleman. So so I helped him. I just worked tirelessly with Kendall to prepare all the materials and to staple things, to put things in folders. I drove across the country with him. We stopped up at Walter Lawson's house because he was, such good friends with Walter, and he played his horns. And we saw his cousins in the Catskill Mountains. And we finally got to the camp. And that first camp, excuse me, some allergies. That first camp, the White Mountains in New Hampshire, if you've never been there, there's some of the most beautiful areas in the whole world. It's just, I'd never been there before. It was like going into paradise. And so all of this stuff was so new. And it's just, I was there a week earlier to help prepare everything, and I was practicing at his house. And so kind of getting lessons at the same time and everything, just really into it. And then the camp started, and I think 28 people came. They were from all over the place, younger students and college students and older students, and even older amateurs. Like one guy was 80 years old. He came. And it was just this amazing. It was all new. It was like a big experiment. So Kendall and I were like, what are we doing? We have no idea. And I remember I got to play. I played for the solo class a couple times. And then one of the real highlights for me was Dave Ohanian played the Strauss First Concerto, and then Kendall played the Strauss Second Concerto with the piano. And then they said, well, we're going to play Concertstück now. And so David, Kendall, and Abby got up, and they asked me if I would play fourth horn in the Concertstück. And I was like, oh, no way, And so I got up there and I tried my best to join them. Everybody was pretty forgiving because it was, kind of on the spot. But
yeah,
I'll never forget that. Those moments stick out in my brain. So, and then there was unclear if the camp would ever continue, but sure enough, the second year, had it again, and I was in college at that point. So I came back and I was helping him again, kind of as an assistant and experiencing the camp. He broadened his faculty. Mike Hatfield came on board, which I think you mentioned was one of your teachers.
Yeah.
I love Mike. Peter Corral came there from Eastman, and Barry Tuckwell was now on the faculty as the solo coach, which was huge. I mean, I was just like Star Trek struck, beyond all levels. And so all these amazing people that I've been inspired by. And so then, every year it just kept on going. And then he finally expanded to 2 weeks. And a couple of years later, he moved the camp to this more of a rustic camp location called Camp Ogons, which originally was a Revolutionary War camp in like the French and Indian War. And then it turned into a girls' finishing school for many, many years, equestrian school. And finally, a couple from Rhode Island had bought it and transformed it into essentially a music camp that would feature Suzuki and choir and fiddling, like a Hardanger fiddling over the course of the summer. And they kind of had really built the camp up, and they finished up all the older buildings. And Kendall decided to make the camp there. And then that Camp Ogons for the past, I guess 17 years now it's been there. That's very much, part of the beauty of the camp is this wonderful outdoor environment. So you have, the mountains all around you. You have these Adirondack cabins and more rustic environment. You have this dining area, which is rustic, but the food is absolutely incredible. There's a lake right there, a big glacial lake that you can go swimming in and go fishing in. Amazing surroundings. You couldn't imagine a more wonderful place for learning the French horn, sitting out, practicing outside. And the faculty was ever expanding. Finally, Herman Bauman became the solo coach after a while. So after a time, once my career got off the ground, once I joined Canadian Brass, for instance, he asked me on his faculty, and I was really honored. And so I have been doing that for the past 11 years now. And it's been a huge part of my own development too. I've talked about various, choices I've made, but the camp itself, you go to this camp and you get to remember one summer, it was like, Kendall was there, Barry Tuckwell was there, Greg Hustis was there, Jim Thatcher was there, Mike Hatfield, other people from Europe. In the course of 1 week, I took lessons with all these people. I heard them all play. I had, fundamentals classes talking about Coprash. You had enough material there for, 2 years to process in this 1 week of camp. And I think back on those experiences I had, and it was such an amazing thing. And for many horn players now, that camp has been a real entryway into the profession. You can kind of look around the country and the world, and many of the alumni, myself included, have been successful in the profession. And the camp still supports them and brings them back as faculty. So anyways, long story short, this past summer, unfortunately, Kendall, he's 68, and he wasn't doing very well during the camp. We didn't know what was wrong. And then over the course of the summer, turned out that he had cancer diagnosis. And so within about a month, his health went down very fast. And I was actually up in the region, unusually so. I was playing for a music festival up there for 2 weeks. The first week was when he actually got the diagnosis. So I was around him during that time. And it was, he's probably the biggest musical influence of my life in many ways, because of when I studied with him in high school and got to work with him at the beginning of my career. He helped me in so many ways. So I felt like it was a weird thing. And I don't know how to describe it. Sometimes you just feel like the universe works in a sort of weird ways, that to have me there. He's really one of the closest people in my life. He was very much like a parent to me. And I was there when he got this diagnosis, and I wanted to help him. Then I had to go away. And then when I came back again, that's when he was beginning the end stages of his life. And so we were helping him and trying to comfort him. And all the while we realized that, his greatest legacy for all the amazing things he did in his life was this camp. And he always wanted it to continue. So he had appointed me recently to the board of directors of the camp. And then when he was still living, we had a board meeting, and we decided that the camp was going to continue. and the board decided to vote me as the new artistic director of the camp. And we also kind of restructured things, so this can be more of a delegated process now instead of just one person doing everything, which would probably be impossible for any one of us. So
Right.
it was a really wonderful honor for me, but obviously under the circumstance, I really didn't process it that way. It was, a very sad time because I had to watch my teacher, slipping away, and luckily got a chance to say goodbye to him, and thank him for all he did for me. And, and then the last 2 months, we've worked tirelessly to organize and set things in place for the next camp. It's already set to go for 2 weeks in the month of June. And the previous faculty is all coming back, excepting one. And I was able to hire Frank Lloyd. You probably know Frank Lloyd, a famous British horn player who took over from Herman Bauman's job.
Oh, yeah.
He's coming back as a solo coach for the week one. It's going to be I'm really, really super excited about it. It's going to be very similar. Previous camps are going to have a big memorial service to celebrate Kendall's life. But I'm just really excited. It's really hard to process it right now because, so many things have happened, and I've had to kind of do this in the midst of, my teaching position and the Canadian brass and traveling and all of that. So it's been a lot to undertake and not much time to process. But all I can say is that, I think that I could not imagine a better team of people than this board of directors to make this camp go forward. I mean, I'm extraordinarily humbled and honored to be a part of this team. I could not do this without the help of every one of them. We're working together to do it under this sort of conditions. And I have no doubt that the camp is going to be an amazing camp this summer. And it's also going to be continuing for as long as we can make it to continue. We set things in place to make sure the camp will become, a fixture for as long as possible. And I just hope that, the camp can be as influential, inspiring, and helpful to as many people as possible as it has been for me. I hope that young players and older players and college students and professionals alike can come to the camp and just immerse themselves in all things French horn and enjoy it in the way that I was able to enjoy it for so many years.
It's great. I'm really excited for it. I'm glad that it's continuing and you're able to carry on the legacy that was put in place by him. So it's amazing.
I'm very honored. It's really hard to process it right now. We're just kind of in survival mode. I think that I would describe it in the last couple of months, just trying to make sure everything's there and working, and not a whole lot of time for thinking, or reflecting. It's just doing right now, and it's all getting done. So
that's good. Well, you sure do have a lot on your plate. I mean, you've created a really creative career, and it has so many interesting facets to it. And now you have the camp, and it's really exciting. And everything that you're describing for the horn world is really incredible. I mean, man, I will definitely continue to recommend that camp. I did have a student go there once, and she really enjoyed it a lot.
Good. Yes, yeah. It'll be a little bit different than it has been, but basically we're going to keep a lot of the aspects the same. Location definitely the same. The location is wonderful. I mean, it's just nice to go in the open air of the mountains and Adirondack style cabins and just play.
It's always nice when there's a beautiful setting and scenery, for sure. That's important.
I mean, really, the mission of the camp is, and I think it has become this, is the preeminent learning center, intensive learning center for horn in the world. Where you can go there for a week and learn things all French horn related. Everything from fundamentals, learning how to make good sounds, to natural horn, to orchestral excerpts, to solo playing, to ensemble playing, private lessons with all these amazing teachers. Now I'm adding Alexander Technique to the mix. I'm bringing Alexander Technique teacher who will also be doing yoga as well for the students.
Oh, great.
And I really think it's a very special place, and it's a great team of people. It really is the group of people that make it special. It's almost like a family, actually. It's really a special place. So anybody who goes there, we embrace everybody, and we would love to bring people into the Horn Camp family. It's a wonderful thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
So I have two final questions for you.
sure.
Um, what is one habit or behavior you've developed that has made the most difference in your career so far?
Ooh, all right. I thought about that. One habit. I was talking to you about this the other night. We have to go after our goals. We have to immerse ourselves in the process to, achieve the goals and establish relationships, all these different things. I think if there's one thing I've been fortunate, I don't know why I've been able to access it in my life, but I have. It's the art of reflection in the midst of all that. I think that's been the one thing that has allowed me to look critically at certain areas of my life and assess them and either say to myself, like, I liked it or I didn't like it. And if I didn't like it, I wanted to make a change. So I think everybody who's listening, keep that in mind. I mean, sometimes, you don't have a lot of time for it, but when you have moments in your life, when like downtime, vacation time, really use it as a time for reflection, because that's when you begin to process all you've done, and it helps to inform the future. It really helps to begin to synthesize all the things that you've experienced. I think if you don't do it, you run the risk of kind of joining the rat race. Sometimes you might be doing things that you may not know why you're doing them, and then all of a sudden you might find you don't like doing them, but you don't know why you don't like it. So I think it's really important, just even if in small moments, to reflect. And I'm still learning how to do it better and better. I'm not an expert in it, but I just think that's that's the one thing. I think for me, I think I've been fortunate to be able to have a reflection. And I think also I've been fortunate to be surrounded by people that encourage it too, like my wife and my kids and my family. I mean, these are my friends. I mean, they're amazingly reflective people themselves. So, I think that's the one habit, and I'm trying to make it more and more of a habit.
That's awesome. And it's good advice, I think, as well, to include that you're surrounding yourself with people who do it themselves and encourage you or make you remember to do it, because that's really important too. The people who you're around. What is that phrase? You're the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most.
Yeah.
And I really believe that, because if you're surrounding yourself with people who are positive and reflective and intuitive and action takers and go-getters and people who follow their heart, like, you're gonna just be like that, instead of if you're around negative people or the opposite of that. So that's a really good point to bring up. And the last question is, who in the classical world inspires you, and tell me why in one sentence.
Oh boy, only one person?
I always bend the rules on this one, so
This is really hard.
Okay,
but whoever I say has to be, I'll describe it in one person or in one sentence. Okay.
Yeah.
Boy, I think about big picture here. I was always really inspired by Leonard Bernstein. The reason is because he was so multifaceted, and he basically gave everything he had to so many areas of life. He had his performing, he had his conducting, he had his composing, and then he had his education. And if you've ever seen the Norton lectures on, Harvard lectures, you see just the incredible mind the guy has. And he just had nothing but love for everything he did. It was very obvious. He just exuded that. And it's probably because I think he just kept challenging himself and kept learning new things. So I really wasn't, it's kind of cliche to say Leonard Bernstein, but I really think that he's one of those people. The more I realize, the more I found out about him, the more I learn, the more I play his music. I just really think this guy, wow, I would like to be a small fraction of this man. It's just to have one portion of his brain or something, just to experience that. Yeah. Yeah, and I love the way his persona was, the way he was so embracing of all people, and was really a humanitarian. Really took his music and used it for good. So.
He was a force, wasn't he?
Yeah, I'd say Leonard Bernstein. I'm definitely inspired by my teachers. I think about Cal Betts and Gail Williams, and studied and Doug Hill, and even other like Herman Bauman, and I also studied a little bit with Freudis Veracruz. Really, really wonderful people. Gunther Schuller, I had the opportunity to work with him intensively a couple of years ago before he passed away. These people are, I don't think I'll ever be able to put into words, how much I've been inspired by these people and how much they've helped me. And, it's hard to say, just how much gratitude you feel towards these people.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that would be about it. I mean, I think, and, of course, I mean, classical music, it's very hard. And my colleagues in the brass too. I mean, I'm very inspired by working with them. And, Chuck, he's just this entrepreneurial mind. I've learned so much about the music business just from hanging out with him. I'm just really fortunate to work with such great people who are both great musicians, and also really great human beings. And my colleagues at the university, I just really, they're all pretty great. Yeah, it's really hard for me to pin it down, put it down. Leonard Bernstein definitely is in a class of his own, and then everybody else, I'm inspired by people like Keith Jarrett, for instance. I love Keith Jarrett. I don't know if you listen to him, his creative pathways. You just check out the Cologne concert or the Vienna concert. These are fully improvised concerts that are recorded. You can listen to them on piano, and he's just one of those people that's just a constant creative force. His whole life is basically the definition of creativity. Like, Miles Davis was like that. And I don't think Joni Mitchell, I think these are not classical artists, but I really inspired by them. And just, talk about, really, really diving into your own artistry and going after it. They've taken some big risks, and people like Bob Dylan. I was just really inspired by those people.
You can't even stay in the classical world. You can't do it in your career, or
I can't.
Or the question.
It's terrible. I totally went outside the bounds of your question, and but I'm not sorry about it because I
forgive you. It's okay.
Okay. Well, I really thank you for having me on this podcast, and I really hope our paths cross really soon. I'd love to hang out and continue these conversations and learn more about your path and all the things you've done, and talk about kids and homeschooling and all the other amazing things that.
There's so much to talk about. I think this podcast could go on for 3 more hours, but people might get mad at us if we do that. So, thank you, Bernhard. Thank you so much for being on the Crushing Classical today, and thank you everyone for listening. And I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.